I'm sure we're all now very intrigued about which school you went to. But please Google outside of chambers. Ms. Sylvia Lim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I commence on my speech proper, I wish to refer to a report in the Straits Times today that erroneously mentioned that I was scheduled to speak on the budget yesterday. I think we had an arrangement with the government whip that under the original schedule I'll be speaking today. So I think the Straits Times was not aware of this, but I hope that they will print a correction to create any misimpression that has been generated by this report. So, sir, I will focus my budget speech on inequality. This budget has as its third plank the fostering of a caring and cohesive society. The concept of care and cohesion, though not new, is timely, given the current public discussion of a class divide in Singapore. The recent study on social capital by the Institute of Policy Studies confirms what we already anecdotally knew. It found, for instance, that on average, Singaporeans who live in public housing have fewer than one friend who lives in private housing. It found that people who study in elite schools also tend to be less close to those in non-elite schools and vice versa. And earlier, the member, Mr. Ganesh Rajaram, also shared his own experience coming from a non-elite background, going to such an elite JC. Sir, this budget explicitly highlights inequality and social mobility as a concern. We also see some measures in this budget in the direction of mitigating the class divide. For instance, tax measures such as raising the top marginal buyer stamp duty rate by 1% for residential properties valued at above 1 million are geared towards requiring the better off to pay more taxes. Another long-standing policy to mitigate inequality is that government transfers are generally weighted in favour of those who live in lower-cost housing or have lower income, such as the GST vouchers and service and conservancy charge rebates. But for all these moves made now and over the years, how well are we doing to reduce inequality, and how much do we really know about the inequality that exists in Singapore? What else do we need to look at or change? Discussions on the status of inequality have tended to focus on numerical data such as the Gini coefficient, which measures income inequality. Our Gini coefficient in 2017 stood at 0.459 before government transfers and 0.402 after transfers, which is improved from 2013. Nevertheless, Prime Minister Lee acknowledged in January that our Gini coefficient was still higher than that of many developed countries. If one looks at household income from work, in 2017, the household income for the top 10% is more than $13,000 per person per month, while that for the 20th percentile at the lower end is about $1,000 per person per month, 12 times more unequal. Our national gross domestic product per capita last year was nearly $80,000, which means that the national GDP, when averaged out per person, is $80,000 per person per year. However, when we look at median income, or the halfway point for households, Department of Statistics data shows that for 2017, the median income per household member was only $32,400 per year, based on a monthly median per person of about $2,700. All these point to high levels of income inequality. The Department of Statistics data on key household income trends indicated that in 2017, there was a slower pace of income growth for the bottom 50% of households, showing a widening income gap. Beyond numbers, it is also necessary to dig deep into the daily lives of poor Singaporeans and evaluate the reasons why they do not seem to be able to catch up with the rest of society. In her recent book, This is What Inequality Looks Like, sociologist Professor Teo Yu Yen shares powerful stories from her years of field work with families living in HDB rental housing. She writes, and I quote, "I saw how tough it is for them trying to balance wage work and care responsibilities. By hearing their stories about jobs, I saw how hard they have to work and how little they get in return for their labor. By asking them about their children, I saw how much their kids struggle in school and how worried parents are that they will eventually have difficult lives. By listening to them talk about their crises, I heard about their feelings of humiliation trying to access social assistance. In paying attention to their everyday experiences, I saw how little dignity they are accorded in our society, unquote. What Professor Teo observed resonates with what we see too. While better-off Singaporeans plan for family holidays with their children, poorer families feel demoralized that they cannot afford to buy needed items that their children ask for. While better-off parents are busy at weekends sending children from one enrichment activity to another, poorer parents spend weekends working and worrying about whether their unsupervised children will fall into bad company. Many of our lower-income residents work hard and even 2 jobs, but may still be unable to pay their bills. Richer children are served and even spoiled by domestic help. Poorer children shoulder responsibilities like caring for younger siblings and even being spokesmen for their parents who do not speak English. In a parliamentary answer in February this year, PM Lee emphasized, and I quote, "Every citizen, no matter what his social background is, must have the opportunity to do better and move up in society based on his efforts and talent. Nobody should feel that his social position is fixed based on his parents' income level or position in life," unquote. Can we say today that the lot of our poorest fellow Singaporeans is due to their lack of ambition or talent? Or does the system itself inadvertently make it difficult for them to succeed and thus perpetuate inequality? For example, do government policies support poor families with adequate and sustainable care for children? Does our education system penalize those who did not have a leg up in preschool? Do housing policies unjustly discriminate against those whose marriages failed? How have children been impacted by their parents' circumstances, and were they supported or facilitated to break out of the poverty trap? Earlier, the member, Mr. Ganesh Rajaram, shared his own experience of social mobility, and I do not know how old he is, but looking, just at the physical appearance, he could be born between the 1960s to 1970s. And I think we can all agree that for persons born during that period, there was probably significant social mobility when compared to parents of the earlier generation. But the important question is, moving forward today, for the new generations of Singaporeans, is social mobility still there, or is it becoming more and more difficult for people to move out of certain social classes? These are serious questions deserving of serious study. To get answers to these critical questions, it is important to do longitudinal studies to track the fate of families over time. In 2013, the government told Parliament that it intends to do longitudinal studies. What has the government done since then? Has the government, for example, started commissioning independent studies on social mobility using longitudinal data? The government has noted in the past that we must not allow an underclass to form, and so the government has to show commitment to this goal. So I should add here that where there is lack of social mobility, it is not only the poorer families that are stressed. Even those higher up the income chain, including the middle class, have the stress of ensuring that they retain their current positions or climb up. The competition in the education system is high. Just look at the money spent on private tuition and other enrichment classes, which in turn adds to the economic stress that families face. Why is it so important to show a commitment to the goal of reducing inequality and increasing social mobility? Because it is vital to our very existence as a nation. We recite the words of the pledge daily. How can we say these things about justice and equality, happiness, prosperity, and progress for the nation if we are perpetuating a society where citizens are not equal, where some are seemingly having little hope and doomed for failure while others zoom ahead? Will there eventually be a erosion of trust where a class divide makes it harder for people at the bottom and middle to identify with those at the top? We fiercely guard our sovereignty and expect all Singaporeans to defend Singapore. But will the day come when Singaporeans who find Singapore a cold and cruel place have no motivation to defend it? This will be a disaster at all levels. So next, I move on to one aspect of inequality that I believe needs to be reviewed, and that is healthcare coverage under medical insurance. If one compares the coverage of private insurance plans with the coverage under MediShield Life, one will observe that there is significant inequality in access to healthcare that affects the poorer and older Singaporeans. As regards insurance coverage, there are some practices in the healthcare industry that need looking at. One such practice is that of some insurance policies providing full coverage for hospitalization bills. Such insurance policies undertake to pay for surgeries as long as they are done as day surgeries or the patient's stay at the hospital. All charges will be paid by the insurance company as charged. Such policies do not require the patient to pay any deductible or make any co-payment. By contrast, MediShield Life understandably has deductibles and co-insurance to avoid overconsumption. One feature of MediShield Life, however, is that the annual deductible rises when one passes 80 years old. While the annual deductible for persons aged 80 and below is between $1,500 to $2,000, the annual deductible for those aged 81 and above is between $2,000 to $3,000. Thus, the most senior of our people, aged 81 and above, who have the least income and most health problems, have to foot bills up to this higher deductible before MediShield Life will kick in. Has the government analysed how this increased deductible has affected the consumption and delivery of medical services to our most senior citizens? To give one specific example, operating on a trigger finger release usually costs less than $2,000, so those aged 81 and above cannot claim the expenses for the surgery, but those who are younger can claim part of the expense, as the deductible is lower for younger people. Premiums are already higher for older people. Why are deductibles also higher, when in general, the older people have less financial ability to pay? Why this reverse discrimination for our older citizens? Coming back to the private as-charged insurance policies, there is another aspect that needs review. Has the government studied the effect of such full coverage policy on the behavior of patients and its implications? When a person has to undergo a minor surgery, which could be done at an outpatient clinic, does he choose instead to do it as a day surgery or an inpatient in a hospital, so as to be able to tap on the insurance policy for full coverage? Does such insurance result in some unnecessary surgeries when more conservative treatments would suffice? Is there inefficiency and a waste of expensive resources caused by such policies? So I'm not suggesting that patients or the medical profession are doing anything unethical, as this behavior is sanctioned by the regulators of the insurance industry. It is important to review the kinds of insurance schemes in the market so as to discourage overconsumption and inefficient use of resources. There have to be deductibles and co-payments for all medical insurance schemes. Regulators have to direct their attention to this area. So in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that inequality is a threat to our solidarity as a nation. We have to drill deeper into the sources of inequality and take concrete steps to remedy it.
Whip.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to make a clarification on the procedures for the speaking. I'd like to make a clarification on the procedures for the sequencing of all members of Parliament for speeches. As a whip, I will usually ask all members of Parliament to indicate whether you would like to speak for a bill. All of you will also indicate to me yes or no, and in certain instances, some of you will indicate a preference to speak on a particular time slot or on a particular day. I will generally try to accommodate as much as I am able to. Then the sequence of the speakers are all published every day by the Parliament in the members' room. But I will always remind members of Parliament that after you have indicated that you like to speak and the sequence is out, that Parliament may move along faster or slower, depending on the progress of the speakers preceding you. So I'd like to remind all members of Parliament that once you have indicated you speak, and as much as I would like to accommodate by giving you the desired slot, Parliament sometimes do move faster or slower. And if you are not in Parliament to speak at your assigned slot in the sequence, then you might wish to inform me early so that I can reinsert you when it is possible to do so. Just as Mr. Low Tia Kiang this morning informed me that Mr. Peng Eng Huat is unable to speak today, and therefore we will take out Mr. Peng Eng Huat's name, and if Mr. Peng Eng Huat appear in Parliament subsequently and decide to be reinserted, Mr. Low will tell me or Mr. Peng will tell me, and we will do so. So what happened was that we published a list yesterday. Ms. Sylvia Lim, you have indicated through Mr. Low Tia Kiang that you wish to speak today. We try to accommodate. Parliament moved along faster than expected yesterday. So your name was called. You were not in the chamber. So we moved on. Today, you indicated you wanted to speak, so we reinsert you as and when we are able to. So I hope that clarifies how we sequence speakers in Parliament. And I'd like to remind all MPs that having indicated to speak, do check on the list that is published by Parliament, the sequence that's been published by Parliament, and do note that while I try to be very precise, sometimes things do move faster or slower. And please be in chamber when your name is called. If you are unable to do so, please keep me informed as soon as possible so that we can inform the rest of the members. Thank you.
Ms. Sylvia Lim.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the Government Whip for his confirmation of the prior communication about our preference to speak on day 2. And I do accept his point. Okay, I should have informed him that I will want to speak today as we had earlier indicated. Thank you, sir.
Whip.
I'd like to thank Ms. Sylvia Lim. I also like to confirm that when I replied Mr. Low Tia Kiang's email to me, that I promise him that I'll try to sequence the speakers in the order that he prefers, but I would like to say that I cannot guarantee you'll be on a particular time slot, because things will move along as we have seen.
We would like to thank both members for the debate on the procedure details, but let's return to the budget.